So let's do a little meditation to begin with. Relax your body and mind. Place your attention on your breathing. Try to bring your attention inward to your mental consciousness and watch the texture of it, its nature, temporarily superimposed by different thoughts, verbal, visual, emotionally toned like waves in the ocean. See if you can develop a mental image of this clarity of the mind that is factually concordant. Let go of the sense of your body. Let go of the sense of your ego. letting go of your ordinary ignorance grasping to the ego, within this clarity of mind, try to develop a special motivation for participating in the class tonight. Whatever problems I have, whatever emotions are brewing in my mind, whatever worries or fears, all of them are transitory. The much more important, greater goal of my life is to try to develop the ability to benefit other beings, to overcome my harmfulness to them, to develop bodhicitta, wisdom realizes emptiness, based on a sense of real understanding of the law of cause and effect, through understanding renunciation. This is the real goal of my life as a Buddhist, to try to bring the greatest benefit to sentient beings by becoming enlightened. And like the great masters of the past, treading in their footsteps, studying the same material that the Buddha proposed, and the great scholars that followed in his footsteps, the yogis, the pundits, in order to sharpen my wisdom, to understand Buddha's intention of the scriptures. I'm going to listen to the teachings tonight, participate, to get closer to that goal. I'm going to listen, participate in order to become, for the sole purpose of becoming a Buddha, an enlightened being, from which state I can perfectly benefit, cause no harm, be totally protected myself from all fears and worries, concerns. And then bringing your attention back to the present. Done. Do you think you could close that door and just mention the people? We have a class here, so they don't. So, I think last time, did we go over the exam? Finish going over the exam last time? How's everyone? Everyone looks rather subdued tonight. Do you look? You feel subdued? No? Yeah. How you feel subdued? Okay.
You feel subdued?
Oh no! Yeah, you too. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel subdued now? Definitely. No? You're unsubdued. Okay, good. Wouldn't want you too subdued. Okay. Usual mucky mind. So any questions about our studies so far? Oh, okay. Maureen, you have something?
Well, it came up in studying, but also in the meditation. I'm kind of curious about, since we can't, where I can't slow my mind down enough to really see how all this works, in talking about these different pieces of like a prime cognition, and then there's a new prime cognition. you have one before, you have this direct, say you have this direct sensory experience,
Mhm.
and then all these other moments of mind come right behind that.
Mhm.
Well, what is it that happens when you go, oh, well, I'm not looking at the blue water bowl anymore, I'm gonna look at the photo of Churinoff. I mean, or my mind goes to somebody I knew in high school, like out of the blue. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, or even in meditation, I see my mind can go, I mean, just all over the map.
Mhm.
And I can't see what prompts.
What prompts those wanderings?
Yeah,
Or what?
what prompts this new
Mhm.
thought?
Well, because we don't have control over our mind now. We don't have single-pointed concentration. We can't, even if we wish to focus on one thing, other thoughts will arise in our mind due to karmic imprints. Some of them we call memories, but some of them are fantasies, future-oriented. Different associations are made. We see something, and some our mind, because not focusing on just one object, is thinking about that in other ways, and by that association, other memories come up, or plans, or worries, or fantasies, and we wander. And when those thoughts come, they're like, again, if you see this, the mind is like a big space, the nature of the mind, these cloud-like thoughts arise in the mind, and instead of, we originally were focusing on one thing, and maybe we were thinking about it in different ways rather than just holding on it single-pointedly. So that instigated other associations. Different thoughts arose within the spaciousness of our mind, and then we got attracted to those and lose the original object.
And
So
so quickly that it just seems like it pops in out of the blue.
Seems like it pops in out of the blue. Yeah. It's in sometimes in our lives, happiness pops in out of the blue. You meet someone, or suffering pops in out of the blue because of karma, right? Because of outer conditions and our karma and our being in certain conditions that are conducive to our karma ripening and that karma being ready to ripen. And then we experience something suddenly. Also within our mind, same kind of thing can happen. Different kinds of thoughts can arise because of the juxtaposition of, say, feeling something with a particular state of mind, with the airs going in a certain way through the nadis, through the channels of our body. And there are many, many different kinds of phenomena. And as we're just beginners in investigating this laboratory of our mind, we'll be, it's just like if you went in to visit some place, there are all sorts of things you might find fascinating. Instead of just doing one task, you say, oh, look at that. Oh, look at, oh, what's this, Oh, look at that. Oh, look, what's that? And different thoughts coming in our mind, we get distracted by them. Mostly what we get distracted by, well, when we're really concentrating, the main objects of distraction are attractive to our mind. It's what we sometimes translate as excitement. It doesn't mean that, I'm excited, but it is just a way of translating a kind of scattering or distracted thought whose object is an attractive object. But right now, we're not at that point yet. We're not even at that calm state of mind. So much of our distraction also is oriented and motivated by objects of discomfort. Maybe worry, low self-esteem, depression, different kinds of things like that might rise. Some object arises, and then a different train of thought starts, and we don't have control over our mind. So that's why this kind of practice, I think, is very useful, even just watching the breathing for a long period of time, and whatever thoughts come up, letting them go. If Trudon Rinpoche comes up, or blue bowl comes up or something, while you're meditating, let that go. then you have, I think there's a different kind of awareness in everyday life when you are observing things. Say you observe the altar and you see the blue bowls, and you can concentrate on that. If indeed you are wishing to see them or think of them, say offer that water in your puja, then you won't be so distracted by other things because you've already trained the mind in formal meditation, focusing on one thing, and you have more ability to just remain on one object that you have chosen to remain on. Is that answering your question? I'm not sure what your
Well,
question
it answers part of it. So what you're saying is if, as we practice enough, we actually might be able to see what associations are made that move us from the blue bowl to...
Whether we can see the associations or not, they may be due to karma, different things. Why does someone suddenly have an insight into something? Because the right karma has ripened. Maybe they've had the right accumulation of merit and certain conditions are there. It's very difficult for us to see the associations, but we may be able to notice our mind thinking in a certain way that before was subliminal, what we might call, some people might call subconscious. From a Buddhist perspective, maybe still conscious, because we use the word consciousness to mean that which is clear knowing, but maybe on a less aware level, more subliminal. Different thought patterns that are kind of like fish swimming underneath the surface of the ice. So we may be able to, as our mind gets clearer, may be able to notice that and what our mind is thinking, the conversations that are going on, and we might be very surprised sometimes, maybe offended, what's going on in there? Or maybe we might be pleasantly surprised if we had some virtuous thoughts, or thoughts of mercy, or wishing others well, or courageous thoughts, to give up our own temporary happiness now for the welfare of others. So I think all of that, those kinds of experiences are the fruit of practice. It's just like people who do exercise or yoga. They notice that there is a continuity. If you keep on doing every day, there's some kind of special experience that's engendered by that. Same thing with meditation. If you keep, and this kind of spiritual practice, if you get familiar with your mind, with the nature of the mind, then you're going to start to make some kind of, develop the ability to concentrate more. And as you have that ability, you notice when distractions come, and you can recognize them for what they are and not get involved. Or if you do begin to get involved with them, you can notice how your mind is getting involved with them, and you can cut that off more easily, rather than trying to push it away, which we find is not, that's kind of like repression. That's not the proper way to deal with distractions, but to bring your mind back to one object. I mean, in a sense, it's like, it's a decision in your mind saying, don't listen to that thought, don't follow that. I can follow that kind of thought anytime. I have numberless times in the past. Let me bring it back to this more virtuous, or at least chosen object of concentration. Okay. Anyway, let's go. So, you have a question? Yep.
And it's, I think, fairly elementary, but I want to get it out of the way anyways.
Okay.
All of these phrases, yogic direct perceiver, prime cognition, inferential prime cognizers, are they different flavors of mind, moments of mind? And if not, what are they?
What do you think? Are they all consciousness?
I believe
Are
so.
they all instances of consciousness? Yeah, they're all different kinds of consciousness, right? But they're different. They're different qualities of consciousness. Like there definitely is a difference in the consciousness which is a sense direct perceiver and a conceptual mental consciousness. They have different
styles, flavors of those 64 moments every moment, or whatever they are.
We have different consciousnesses that are simultaneous. We have eye consciousness, ear, so forth, 5 sense consciousnesses that are simultaneously functioning, and a mental consciousness that's simultaneously functioning.
Okay.
I thought, our mental consciousness is the most decisive in that it pays attention to the other consciousnesses. If it doesn't pay attention to them, they are what are called inattentive. They're just like the TV camera that no one's watching. It's functioning, and those consciousnesses do perceive their objects, but there is no way to recall what they were knowing unless our mental consciousness actually pays attention to them. So we may pay partial attention, maybe for an instant, to the eye consciousness, to the ear consciousness when we're looking at someone when they're talking. We may be alternating between the two. It may seem like we are equally paying attention to both. So we're eating a candy bar at the same time, or having a conversation at dinner, looking at our companion, eating our food, tasting it, smelling the aroma, feeling the texture of the food. All of the different consciousnesses might seemingly be simultaneous, but I think one would have to investigate in your own experience whether the mental consciousness is partially paying attention to all of them at the same time. Might be in some cases that's a little bit paying attention to both, but probably it's putting its attention on one and then moving to the other and then moving to the other in succession. So all of those different mental experiences are simultaneously going on, and they all have their own flavor, so to speak. Yeah, they all have their own texture, their own qualities. Okay, let's go a little bit further in text. We're getting pretty close to finishing up some important subjects here. Now, last time, I think, did we get up to, do you have in your text about page 33? We were talking about subsequent cognizers, right? Subsequent cognizer is a knower that realizes what has already been realized. So could we say a doubting consciousness, the second moment of a doubting consciousness, Carrie, is a subsequent cognizer?
I think we could.
The second moment of a doubting consciousness, not the first moment, the second moment, that's thinking, maybe sound is impermanent, it probably is. Doubt, leaning in the right direction. Is that a subsequent cognizer? Carrie says yes, unless he's changed his mind. Yeah, the second one. Who's got it? Diane, do you have a what's the word? An opinion, or wisdom, a realization.
Vague idea. I don't think it can be called that because subsequent cognizers need to be realizing something. So doubting consciousness isn't realizing its object, so it can't
Okay.
be referred to as a subsequent cognizer.
What would you say? Would you defend yourself, or would you say, "Oops"?
No, I recall reading something like
Okay.
that. Some vague recollection.
How about a vague recollection? What is a vague recollection? So how about a correctly assuming consciousness or presumption? The second moment of that, is that a subsequent cognizer? For the same reason, right? Because a correct belief or assuming consciousness doesn't actually realize its object. It has an object which it believes is true and is by definition correct. That is to say, if it were not correct, it would be like Sister Oma's intuitions that don't turn out to be true. Right? Remember we were talking about that before, whether intuition actually, when your intuitions are right, you call them intuitions. When they're not right, we call them something else.
No, I realize why I was saying that is because I'm equating intuition with clairvoyance.
Right. Right. So in the case of just believing something is true, we may not actually. That's for the defining characteristic here is for something to be a subsequent cognizer, it has to be the second or later moments of a realizing consciousness. And how many realizing consciousnesses are there? How many different consciousnesses realize their objects? Does it have to be the second moment after a prime cognition? Are only prime cognizers realizing consciousnesses? What else realizes its object? Pardon me?
Sense, mental inferentials, yogic.
Right. I said, do only prime cognizers realize their objects? Because those could be instances of prime cognizers, right?
I would say no. I'd say
That's a defining characteristic, though, of a prime cognizer, right? A prime cognizer has to realize its object, but that has to be a fresh realization. So subsequent cognizers can rise in the train of a prime cognizer, or in the train, you can have a remembering consciousness of something that you realized in the past, a conceptual consciousness that realizes that. And that can also be a subsequent cognition. Okay? We said when there are, on page 33, when conceptual subsequent cognizers are divided, because the first we talked about directly perceiving subsequent cognizers. And there were 4 kinds, right? Subsequent direct perceivers, subsequent what? Mental direct perceivers, subsequent self-knowing direct perceivers, and subsequent yogic direct perceivers. The usual 4 divisions of direct perceivers. Now the second division of subsequent cognizers, because there were three divisions. Second one is conceptual subsequent cognizers. And when those are divided, there are 2. Subsequent cognizers, conceptual subsequent cognizers that are induced by direct perceivers, and conceptual subsequent cognizers that are induced by inferential cognizers. Didn't we talk about this last time? A little bit? Okay. But it's simple, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
On the direct perceiving subsequent cognizers, it says there are 5. The 4 you listed, and then the last one is a point you made last week, but I didn't quite get.
Oh.
Didn't grok.
All right, you didn't grok that one. There were 5, not just 4.
Perceiving subsequent cognizers that are none of these 4.
Mm-hmm. None of the 4.
That's the 5th one.
Right. So what does that mean? Does that mean that there's some new kind of direct perceiver that we never talked about before? Because what about the let's say a subsequent moment in the train of a sense direct perceiver? What would that be? Let's say the subsequent moments of a sense direct perceiving prime cognizer. Those would be, that would be that first category, right? That would be a sense direct perceiving subsequent cognizer. And the subsequent moments of a mental prime cognizer would be the subsequent moments, would be a subsequent cognizer of a mental direct perceiver. But what if I just said, how about the subsequent moments of a direct perceiver? Don't look at him. Look at me. Subsequent moment of a direct perceiver. Which of those 4 is that?
I think it could be, we need further definition of which of them would be.
But there is such a thing, isn't there? Isn't there a subsequent? Isn't that a viable answer to a subsequent cognizer? Say the subsequent moment of a direct perceiver. Doesn't that fit the category? So that is not any of those 4 categories. It's not a sense direct perceiver, subsequent cognizer. It's not a subsequent cognizer of a mental direct perceiver or a yogic direct perceiver or a self-realizer. So that's another category that one can construe. And oftentimes one finds in the scriptures, a lot of times when one makes enumerations, there'll be an enumeration of something which is neither of the two, or not one of the four, none of the above four in this case, right?
So could it be a subsequent moment of a remembering consciousness? Or correctly assuming? Or?
Would those be sense? That would be a sense direct perceiver. Yeah, we don't know. It might be mental, but both of those are conceptual? The ones you just gave, right? So those would not be these divisions. The first ones we were just talking about were sense direct perceivers. So you can't actually, what do you say, point out any sense direct perceiver which is not one of those four. But you can point out something in general. You can say sense direct perceiver. And then you'd have to, as you said, well, that would require more enumeration. But that still is, a sense direct perceiver. That is, a direct perceiver. Even if you don't say sense direct perceiver or mental direct perceiver or yogic direct perceiver or self-knowing direct perceiver, it still is the category of direct perceiver. And so, or let's say prime cognizer. If you said the second moment after a prime cognizer in that train of consciousness, that would be that would be a subsequent cognizer. But because it's not specified. It's not one of those four categories. There's nothing tricky here. It's not like there's some. You follow? Does it make sense philosophically? Is that? No, it's not even. That is definitely a terminological division. Actual terminological division would mean something that's not really that. It's just called that. But that is the second moment of a prime cognizer, of a direct perceiving prime cognizer. The second moment or subsequent moments of that, are they not direct perceiving subsequent cognizers? Definitely, right? But are they sense direct perceivers? Well, you can't say for sure. You just said direct perceiver. You didn't say whether it was sense or mental or whatever. So it's just the general category. So here that's given as a fifth kind.
But is there anything else that you could say that also fit in that fifth category?
There's nothing that's in that fifth category that's not in one of those other four categories. If you gave specifics of it, but that if you don't give a specific, you can when you talk in general, you can.
That's the only general comment you could make that would keep it in the correct.
Anything that is that fifth category, if you were to find out an example of it, a specific example of that fifth thing, it would have to be one of the other four, because those are the only four kinds of direct perceivers there are. But if you don't categorize which of them you're talking about, then...
But it would then, the only thing that can be done is to call it a direct perceiver and not add any information. You can't call it...
Here we'd
no
call...
other word you could use that would be general and would still fit.
No, you just say the second... Here we're talking about the... what's the example here? It says the example, the second moment of a direct perceiver.
Which school are you taught? Are you still using the software?
Pardon me?
Which school are you going to?
We're sure we're talking about this school, the Sautrantika school.
Okay, because
Is that actually right? The second moment of a direct perceiver is going to be a subsequent cognizer?
that's what they tell us.
Is a inattentive perception, is that a direct perceiver? Inattentive perception, is that a direct perceiver? That's not a direct perceiver? Not a directly perceiving consciousness? Remember if we talked about direct perceivers,
It has to be answered.
there are only three categories. There were prime cognizers, subsequent cognizers, or inattentive, or let's say consciousnesses to which an object appeared but was not ascertained. So that's not a realizing consciousness. That doesn't induce ascertainment afterwards. A realizing consciousness, although the eye consciousness perceived its object, it's said to be not a realizing consciousness because it doesn't induce a mental awareness that you realize that. So realization doesn't mean just that your camera, let's say the cameras are working, and you say, oh, yeah, I realized that flower. But if you weren't paying attention, that's not called a realizing consciousness, okay? It has to induce a mental consciousness that realizes that you've seen that. So here, my question is, this fifth one, the second moment of a direct perceiver. These are supposed to be examples of subsequent cognizers, right? So I'm positing some counterexample. I'm saying, okay, the second moment of a inattentive perception. That's not a subsequent cognizer, is it? Or is it? Is that a subsequent cognizer? No, because it's not a realizing consciousness. So I'm just saying maybe one has to watch the wording here a little bit. The second moment after a prime direct perceiver would definitely be a subsequent cognizer. But the second moment of a direct perceiver could mean the second moment after a inattentive perception, I think. Because you have to be careful, I think. So,
But then one could say that, right? One could say that, and because you'd said it, it would make it a subsequent. It would not be inattentive. If you say it was a subsequent cognition.
no, but this is just let's say I say to you, Karen, give me an example of a subsequent cognizer, which is none of those four categories. And you said the second moment of a direct perceiver. Well,
Maybe.
that is not necessarily a subsequent cognizer. An example has to be that thing, right?
Okay.
This is what I'm proposing, because a direct perceiver also includes inattentive perceivers. The second moment of an inattentive perceiver is not a subsequent cognizer because it doesn't realize its object.
So that guy doesn't fit in that fifth category either. So
That's what I'm saying, that maybe some other words have to be added here. Maybe it has to be a prime direct perceiver, the second moment of a prime direct perceiver. For, say, the first example, the second moment of a sense direct perceiver apprehending blue. Can you have a sense direct perceiver apprehending blue, which is an inattentive perception? No? Why not?
Because then it couldn't realize the color blue.
apprehend.
I'm not sure what the word muzinbe. Does an inattentive perception apprehend its object? Does it? Does it have an appearing object? Then it has an apprehended object. And for direct perceivers, the appearing object and the apprehended object are the same. So it would seem like it apprehends. It's just that it doesn't induce. It's like the camera's working, you might say, but there's no one paying attention to it. So I'm just proposing maybe these examples, these illustrations. You have to think about them a bit, whether they're exactly right or not. See if there's something earlier in the explanation that makes them correct or not. The second one, the second moment of a clairvoyance, knowing another's mind, still, that's going to be a realizing consciousness, clairvoyance, knowing another's mind. I don't think that can be inattentive. Third and second moment of a self-knowing direct perceiver, experiencing the I consciousness, and so forth. Not sure. Fourth example, second moment of an uninterrupted path of a path of seeing. That's going to be a yogic direct perceiver, and those are always not inattentive. Those always realize their object. So that would definitely be, from my point of view, there'd be no doubt that that is a subsequent cognizer. But I have some doubt about the other ones. So if you can find some error in what my qualm is, then you can bring up. Makes sense. Let's go on to the second category here, though. The second, subsequent cognizers that are conceptual subsequent cognizers. Those that are induced by direct perceivers and those that are induced by inferential cognizers. So we talked about this last time. The first is a factually concordant ascertaining consciousness, ascertaining blue, that is induced by a sense direct perceiver apprehending blue. Factually concordant ascertaining consciousness. Because an ascertaining consciousness, the way this word is used, an ascertaining consciousness is necessarily a mental consciousness. Something we don't call sense consciousnesses ascertaining consciousnesses. Factually concordant ascertaining consciousness, ascertaining blue. So here, the second time it says ascertaining, that kind of implies realizing blue, that is induced by a sense direct perceiver apprehending blue. So you've had a sense direct perceiver apprehending blue. I don't know if there's blue out here, so here's blue, or someplace here's blue. And the subsequent to that, you have a mental consciousness, a conceptual consciousness, which is correct, which is factually concordant. It's not like misinterpreting that, ascertaining blue, that was induced by that sense direct perception. Or the second example, the second moment of an inferential cognizer realizing sound to be impermanent. Is that still an inferential cognizer? Bonnie? The second moment of an inferential cognizer realizing sound to be impermanent? It's an example or an illustration here of a subsequent cognizer, but is it a inferential cognizer? What's the word we use? Inferential cognizer? Is that the word we use? What do you think, Carrie? Is that an inferential cognizer?
No, I think the first moment was inferential, but after, since it was directly perceived through inference, now it is a direct. It
arose directly in dependence on a sign. So according to these tenets, the subsequent moments are no longer inferential cognizers, but they are called subsequent cognizers, induced by an inferential cognizer. So only the first moment of that inference, of that consciousness that has depended upon the sign that's realized the object, only that first moment is called an inferential cognizer. That's the prime cognizer, because prime cognizers are just two kinds: direct perceivers that are prime, and inferential cognizers that are prime. Right? You following?
Yeah, I'm following. I was just thinking, in Monty Rinpoche's book, if I read it correctly, and I was just looking around to see, I don't remember what page, but he's, in the text that he's giving commentary on, he says that it can be divided into three, so that the subsequent moment, he says in Purvachok's text, what I understood is that inferential cognizer definitely means that it's going to be a new cognizer, but then in the text that he's giving commentary on, it made it sound like you could have a subsequent inferential cognizer.
Let's see. Do you remember what page? Yeah.
It doesn't seem quite possible.
Pardon me? Doesn't seem possible?
It was just the wording, but it was divided into three instead of two.
Mhm.
And then he comments and says in Purvachok's text there's only the two divisions.
Yeah. In the different, even amongst the Galupas, let's say, that are interpreting the Sautrantika. So we're taking Sautrantika as the tenets we're investigating. So the Gelugpas in general have a certain interpretation. Maybe the Kargyupas or the Nyingmas, other traditions would have slightly different interpretations according to their great lamas that wrote their textbooks and debated about them and everything. And even among Gelugpas, there'll be different, what we call yikcha. Yikcha means like monastic textbooks that's used at the different monasteries. And like, say, Sarah J's yikcha. Well, many of the monasteries use Purbachok for these beginning courses, but some of them use others. There's texts by Pension Sonam Drakpa at, I think at Loseling, Drebung Loseling, and there's Jesun Trugi Gelson is the textbook writer of Sarah J in general. There's a different textbook writer for Sarah May, and is it Jangse, the Drebung Jangse, Ganden Jangse. Ganden has two colleges, Shartse and Jangse. All of them, almost all of them, have different textbooks that they use. So when they debate, as their own positions are slightly different, one would say that only the first moment of a subsequent only the first moment of an inferential cognizer is a subsequent cognizer. Only that first moment, that prime cognizer, is a subsequent cognizer. In the subsequent moments of it, which are realizing consciousnesses, are no longer called inferential cognizers because they, according to their interpretation, a subsequent cognizer has to be induced directly by the reason. And so only the first moment would do that. So,
That's on page 76. and we're looking at
okay, so here.
the third paragraph, right
Okay.
under the small.
Right. So it says, thus in this text, which he's using a text, a short text that's being used at, I think at Ganden these days.
This is another text, Purbachok.
As they say, Geshe Jambel Sambel. Not a super famous Lama. This is somewhere around the turn of the century, I think, more recent times, or maybe even later than that. He says, thus in this text, there's a distinction between inferential cognizer and inferential prime cognizer. In other texts, for instance, Purbachok's awareness and knowledge, which we're studying here, this distinction is not made. The two are considered synonymous. So if something is an inferential cognizer, it is an inferential prime cognizer, according to our tenets, right? So if you were debating at Sarah, let's say, and you were to say that, then you would, because you're supposed to be basing all of your knowledge on Purbachok, you would be roundly debated against. Although you could certainly hold that position, and you would have to defend it somehow. Okay, but sometimes if we get to thinking, we understand the way that it's not as though these different ideas are in contradiction to one another. They're actually just different ways of interpreting the same thing. When you get down to actually understanding beyond the words, maybe the people would still be, they would have the same kind of understanding. What we would call a subsequent cognition induced by an inferential cognizer is still a realizing consciousness. So we wouldn't understand its qualities any different than, say, someone who studied at Ganden or something like that. But we would say, no, we wouldn't categorize that. We wouldn't label that as a inferential cognizer any longer, because according to our tenets, to be a real inferential cognizer, it had to be directly developed from a sign. Like, say, for instance, sometimes if you take the Bodhisattva vows, I don't know who knows. If you take the Bodhisattva vows, Sarah, are you a Bodhisattva? Why not? Some people say, some people in the Nyingma, some of the Nyingma texts and others, they say if you take Bodhisattva vows, you're a Bodhisattva. Pardon? Well, if you take the vows, can a Bodhisattva break their vows? Yeah. If you take, is someone really a Bodhisattva by simply taking their vows?
If you take it from the point of view that the seed has been implanted there, and so therefore, by from that seed only a bodhisattva can grow, then you can do it.
Then you can do what?
Say that that person is a bodhisattva.
So when I plant a redwood seed, can you plant a redwood tree from redwood seed? Is there such a thing? Redwood seed? Okay. So when I plant a redwood seed, I can say, there's a redwood tree, according to Oma.
The potential is there.
Yeah, the potential, but is that, no, yeah, but I'm not talking about the potential, I wouldn't, the text is not saying that person is a potential bodhisattva, because all sentient beings are potential bodhisattvas.
Okay.
All sentient beings are potential bodhisattvas. Because according to the highest philosophical school, everyone has Buddha nature and everyone will eventually attain enlightenment. Even if they first enter in the Hinayana path and attain arhatship. Even if it takes them eons. Even if they're the last sentient being. They all have the potential to be bodhisattva. So when I plant a seed, I might say I've planted, we do use that terminology. I planted a tree, I planted trees in the backyard. But there's no trees there yet, right? There's not even sprouts yet. I just tossed down the seeds 5 minutes ago, and they're not even germinated or anything. But we do use that terminology, but that's, one has to investigate that. That kind of terminology is investigated in the Prasangika teachings, about in the Madhyamaka teachings. But here, in answer to Diana's question, indeed there are different tenets. But here, if you were taking an exam on Purvachok's, you'd have to follow his tenets. You could give some you could say, according to Purvachok, it has to be only the first moment is an inferential cognizer, and there's no subsequent cognizers that are inferential cognitions. But in my opinion, based on other Lama's thinkings, that it makes sense to blah 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 blah. You could sound like that, but you'd have to give the first of all what the reigning view is, right? So, okay, let's go on to the next one. On page 34, near the bottom of the page, with regard to the second of the non-prime consciousnesses, because we're dividing up how many non-prime consciousnesses are there? We're going to talk about, I think, 5, right? There's 2 kinds of prime cognizers. Direct perceiving prime cognizers and inferential prime cognizers. And then there's 5. This is second of the non-prime consciousnesses. No, I'm not saying this right. Second of the non-prime consciousnesses. Right, non-prime consciousness. It doesn't say non-realizing consciousness, non-prime consciousnesses. So subsequent cognizer is not prime, but still realizes its object. Now these other, after the first one, that was subsequent cognizer that realizes its object, the other 4 are going to be non-realizing consciousnesses, not only non-prime, but not realizing. So here, the first of those, the second of the non-prime cognizers, is a correctly assuming consciousness. So we can translate this different ways. We could translate it correctly assuming, assumption. Actually, maybe correctly assuming is better than assumption, because you can have a wrong assumption, can't you? So this is talking about a particular kind of mind which is correct. How about presumption? Can you have a wrong presumption? I presumed you were the one, but I was wrong. Yeah, so you can have a wrong presumption. So somehow, maybe the word correct has to be in there. Okay? Or correct belief. You could call it. I've believed something correctly. So the definition of that is a factually concordant, determinative knower, which is which is controvertible with regard to determining its object. Because who can explain what that means? Bonnie, can you break that down? No? No. Is it L? No, it's not L. Mark.
Okay. You never will get down.
Correctly assuming. Just call me Al. I like that song. correctly assuming consciousness. Can you break this down? Factually concordant determinative knower. What does that indicate? A is a particle, right? That's easy to say. A is one thing. Factually concordant means what? This is a consciousness, a knower, which is factually concordant. What does that mean, Chris? What do you think? Factual?
I would say it is in line with the facts.
It's in line with the facts. It's not wrong, right? And it's a determinative knower. What does a determinative knower mean?
Conceptual?
What is it? A determinative knower. Then it gets at its object. So that means I consciousness is the determinative knower. Gets at its object. It determines its object. Here, that's a synonym of a conceptual consciousness, right? A determinative knower is a conceptual consciousness. Okay. Factually concordant conceptual consciousness, a determinative knower, which is controvertible with regard to determining its object. What does controvertible mean? It doesn't have surety?
Yeah, like if it's incontrovertible, you're totally sure that
Ah, okay. So this has to be a correctly assuming consciousness doesn't have surety about its object because it's controvertible. It's not sure.
yeah.
I say, I have a correctly believing consciousness that sound is impermanent. Completely, I completely believe that, but I'm not sure about it.
Somebody else's statement or out of a book, but I haven't reasoned it out, so I'm not. If you started arguing with me, I would.
I'm going to argue with you about that.
Okay.
Controvertible here doesn't mean you're not sure. You may be sure, like you may be absolutely certain in your own mind, yeah, I've realized emptiness. I know my guru is Buddha, I know this. But that doesn't mean that you've realized it. Surety, meaning being sure about something, and actually realizing it are different. This kind of consciousness is sure. This kind of consciousness is not a doubt where he's thinking, well, maybe, I'm not sure, they sound permanent or impermanent, I'm not quite sure. Maybe it's probably permanent, probably impermanent, but man, I'm not sure. Not like that. It's absolutely made up its mind single-pointedly, but not for perfect, it doesn't have a perfect reason, or it's an inconclusive reason. We'll talk about the divisions in just a couple of minutes.
But I thought that meant that you could be persuaded another direction because you weren't sure of it. Because
It's not because you're not sure of it.
Reason it out.
It's yeah, but here's this is good to get more clearly what's meant. It's not that you're not sure about it, but the basis of your surety is not based on a realization. It's not based on real. It's kind of an opinion, you might say. Okay, so why don't we take a little break and have some opinion of the drinks over here, and then we'll talk about the divisions of this, and we'll go on to the next ones. So, now we're talking about what are we talking about? Correctly assuming consciousness. We're talking about correctly assuming consciousness is on page 34, right? This is the second of the non-prime consciousnesses. The first one was subsequent cognizers. So the definition is a factually concordant determinative knower that is controvertible with regard to determining its object. That means thinking about, conceptualizing its object. It's controvertible. That means, although it may be sure about it, it's not as though it's unsure, Karen. Mm-hmm. It's controvertible. That means it is fallible. Maybe we could use that. Does that word help? Controvertible is not an everyday word. Do you use that in the office every day? Controvertible? Yeah. That's what I thought. So you could say it's not that it's wrong, because it's not as wrong about its object with regard to determining its object. It's just not, it is not infallible. Let me use a double negative in a sense. It is fallible. It is not infallible. That is to say, it hasn't realized its object. It hasn't eliminated superimpositions and gotten at its object perfectly, okay? Does that make sense? Chris, what do you think? That's pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Correctly assuming consciousness? Presumption? When correctly assuming consciousnesses are divided, there are 5, according to Perpetuok's text here. There are other different divisions, other great lamas of the past, I think. Maybe one of the Soquel lamas, Sakya Pandita, maybe divided a different way. I can't remember, into 3 or whatever. But basically, we still have the same number. First kind is correctly assuming consciousnesses which do not have a reason. What does that mean, that do not have a reason? Sarah, you didn't bring your book with you? You were doing tours before this.
Yes.
Okay. Example on the next page. An awareness that apprehends sound to be impermanent, independence upon the mere words. Sound is impermanent, Or to say, my lama said, I heard, if you take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, you will be protected. Or the Virgin Mary will protect you if you pray to her, or whatever. If you just have a belief in something, assumption or presumption on the basis of mere words without any kind of sign, that's, even if it's correct, I'm not saying the Virgin Mary will protect you, but maybe she will. But even if it's correct, will she protect you? Maybe. I don't know. Could be. There might be some feminine energy that can be imputed that way. We say Tara, Buddhists might say maybe that means Tara. That would be an example of this first division of correctly assuming consciousness that's not based on a reason, or does not have a reason. Second one, correctly assuming consciousnesses that have contradictory reasons. So what's a contradictory reason? Contradictory reason means it proves the opposite of what you think. What could I say? Sound is impermanent because it's not a product, or it's not produced or something. Example, correctly assuming consciousness having a contradictory reason is, for example, an awareness that apprehends sound to be impermanent from the sign of being empty of being able to perform a function. That means not able to perform a function. Empty of that. This is a suitable example because empty of being able to perform a function is contradictory with impermanence. Okay, if someone gives, sometimes we have that. The first kind of example, if someone said sound in a debating courtyard, if someone said sound, if they were debating with you and they said, it follows that sound is impermanent, what answer would you give? Do you know? No, that's not one of the possible answers. There's no signs been giving, so you can't say there's no privation. I think you would say, why? In Tibetan we say, chichir. This means asking for a reason, essentially. It's just they haven't given a reason. They say, sound follows that sound is impermanent. And maybe they're basing it on something else earlier, but in Tibetan debate you would say, because the sign of a very good debater would be that they would limit themselves to 3 or 4 possible answers, whatever the person says, rather than saying, look at, it's a little bit like this. That's not the sign of a good debater. They would just still, even if the other people were getting excited, they didn't understand the debate well, and they were saying, oh, look what you said, you would just be saying things like, why? The sign is not established. There's no pervasion. There are a couple of other obscure kind of things that one might say, but those are the main things you would say. The sign is not established, there's no pervasion. Or you could accept, you could say de. That means, right, okay, I agree. Someone might say, follows that sound is impermanent because it's a product. There. What are you going to say to that? And you say, de. That means I accept. That means I agree with you. I agree. That might throw them for a loop also because they think they're trying to debate with you, okay? So this one, what if, Carrie, what if he said, sound is impermanent because it is empty of being able to perform a function? What answer, if I was debating with you and I said that to you, what would you say?
You gotta think about it.
You can't say why, because I've given you a reason. Would you accept? You wouldn't accept, right? Because it's not correct. That it's impermanent because it's empty of being able to perform a function. So would you say the sign is not established? Tagmadrup, or would you say there is no pervasion? Kappa majum.
The sign is not established.
That means sound, in this case what? Sound is impermanent from the sign of being empty of being able to perform a function. So you would say sound is not empty. You would say there's no, that it's not established that sound is empty of being able to perform a function. Okay? I think, I'm not absolutely certain, I think in general, what if there also, is there any pervasion in this case? Is there a pervasion that if something is empty of being able to perform a function, that it is impermanent? No, there's no pervasion either. So when you have both, when the sign is not established and there's no pervasion, I'm not sure. I think in general you would start with saying the sign is not established. Okay, like you did. Okay, but you could also say kappa majom. And then the third example, illustration rather, or let's say divisions. A correctly assuming consciousness for an indefinite reason. This is a little bit funny when they say mangepa, uncertain reason. Uncertain reason, or in other words, there's no. She says there's no, or lacks pervasion. Do you see that one? The third, correctly assuming consciousness for which the reason is. His is not ascertained. Maybe that's not right because the word nyepa sometimes means verb to ascertain. It means the reason is indefinite. Is, for example, because the word nyepa can also mean definite, like the time of death is definite, right? The time of death is indefinite. Manyepa. Death is definite. The time of death is indefinite, right? You could say the time of death is not ascertained. Death is ascertained. Can you say that? We wouldn't say that, right? We'd say it's definite. Okay? So here it's indefinite or uncertain, the reason. Is, for example, an awareness which apprehends sound to be impermanent from the sign of being an object of comprehension. Sound is an object of comprehension, isn't it? Bonnie, what do you think? Is it an object that can be known? Is it object can be known? Can sound be known? Yeah, it's an object of comprehension. It's all knowable objects of comprehension. But because something is an object of comprehension, is there so it has the property of the subject, but is there a pervasion because something is an object of comprehension that it is necessarily impermanent? No, it could be permanent. There are two kinds of objects of comprehension that you can know. You can comprehend objects that are permanent and impermanent. Does that make sense? What's a more common? What could you give a common example for Thea? She's thinking this sounds too theoretical, right? Who can give a more common sense syllogism? which would be the basis of a correctly assuming consciousness based on a uncertain sign. The reason is indefinite. The reason is indefinite or uncertain, or the sign is uncertain. The man with the rosary around their neck is a Buddhist because they're wearing a rosary around their neck. Is that a definite sign? Because someone's wearing... I mean, a person with a rosary around their neck does have a rosary around their neck, so it has the property of the subject. But is it definite that someone that has a rosary around their neck is a Buddhist? No, it's not definite, right? Okay. It's some kind of symbol. And then, fourth one, a correctly assuming consciousness for which the reason is not established. Here, this would be Kappa Madrum. What did we say before? The sign is... What would you say for the third one, by the way? If you said, sound is impermanent because it's an object of comprehension, what would be the answer?
There's no pervasion?
So I think it's a Kappa Madrum, right? Here it says there's no pervasion, the next one, the reason is not established. The fourth, an illustration of that is an example, an awareness which apprehends sound to be impermanent from the sign of being an object of apprehension by eye consciousness.
Eye consciousness doesn't determine sound or recognize sound.
Here it says, sound is impermanent because it's an object of eye comprehension. Is sound, to have the property of the subject, sound would have to be an object of eye consciousness. Is that true? No. So it doesn't have the property of the subject, so you say the sign is not established.
Okay, the sign's not established.
You say tagmadru. So that's what it says here, isn't it? It says, here they're using the word sign. We could say the reason is not established, but the word tak usually means sign. Sometimes we use other words for reason. And then the fifth kind is correctly assuming consciousness. Excuse me. Correctly assuming consciousness for which a reason exists but is not settled. The reason is not settled. So what does that mean? Example. An awareness which apprehends sound to be impermanent. Notice it says apprehends sound to be impermanent. Does that mean it realizes sound to be impermanent? No, to apprehend doesn't mean to realize. It just means that's its apprehended object. Or let's say its object of engagement. Sound is an awareness which apprehends sound to be impermanent from the sign of being a product. That's a correct sign. You couldn't say, if you were debating, if someone said sound is impermanent because it's a product, you'd say, what would you say? Duh. It means I accept. That you mean? Almost sounds like Homer Pyle. Who is it? Gomer Pyle?
Simpson.
Homer Simpson. Yeah. Doesn't he say duh? Or duh? Duh. Duh. It's not duh. This is duh. Duh in Tibetan means, it's the same word that means desire, but it also means accept. Now you know, they may be debating with you. It may be very profound. So, not settled mean, this is not talking about debate now, this just means the person may have in their mind a correct reason, but it has not been settled. Not all of the elements have been realized. They may not have the establishing cognition that knows that sound is a product and that all products are impermanent. That inferential cognizer has not been generated in their mind. So even the moments just before an inferential cognizer, before you actually have a prime cognizer and you realize the sound is impermanent by the sign product, that would still be maybe like this. That would be a correctly realizing consciousness where the sign is unsettled. The next moment when the sign becomes settled and set up in your mind and everything is established, maybe first you realize that sound is a product. All products are impermanent. Do you necessarily realize sound is impermanent by the sound product then? Not necessarily. You still have to think about it. Sound is a product, and all products are impermanent. Therefore, it makes sense. Sound is impermanent because it's a product. One has to develop a simultaneous understanding of those things in one's mind. When that inferential cognizer arises, that would be the realization, right? That would be the inferential cognizer. Up till then, that would be an inferential, correctly assuming consciousness based on an unsettled sign. Okay, I'm not going to go into detail about that because there's some other definitions that are given in the great text by Rato. There was a famous monastery in Tibet that I visited, and not so far from Lhasa, called Rato. And there was one of the famous Dura texts, the text on collected topics, called Rato Dura. There's Rato Kyongla Rinpoche, in New York. Rato, they say Chongla or Kyongla. He was one of the high lamas at Rato Monastery. It was right near the Tara Gompa that Atisha built in Lhasa. Sarah and Drebung are very close to Lhasa, sort of right in Lhasa. And then outside of Lhasa, on the way to Ganden, Ganden is, I don't know by horse how long it would take, but by car it took like several hours to go, by bus. Maybe by horse it might have taken a day or more, I don't know. But on the way to Ganden, also you'd pass this, I think it was called Droma Lakang, what would you call it? The temple of the goddess Tara. And right behind that was Rato Monastery. And one of the great lamas of Rato, wrote a Dura text, and one of the definitions, here it's on this page, it says, which page is this? On 35. Someone might say, at the bottom of the page, the definition of a correctly assuming consciousness is a determinative knower that newly and one-pointedly ascertains its true object without depending on experience or a basis which is a correct sign. So that's a definition that I think very similar to that is what comes in the Rato Dura. So if you're interested in looking at that debate and trying to understand why that definition might be not perfectly held in debate, this doesn't mean that it's wrong, but it has a certain basis. And it's not that the great Rato was wrong, but if you check in Lati Rinpoche's book, it talks a little bit about that, so we won't go into those details right now. Is that okay? Does that seem comfortable? Okay. So, on 37, the third of the 5 types of non-prime cognizers. So what did we talk about? Non-prime cognitions, we talked about subsequent cognition. Why is that non-prime? Doesn't it realize its object? Pardon? It's not fresh. It's not new. Correctly assuming consciousness. Now, third one, a consciousness to which, an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained, without being ascertained. So inattentive perception. So the definition is a knower that is a common locus. That means it has to simultaneously fulfill these different criterion, these 2 criterion in this case. Common locus of having a clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena which is its object of operation. You could change that to say object of engagement, because also in her other book, she must have the same word, jukyul, she translates sometimes as object of operation, but even in the later things she says object of engagement. I don't think there's two different Tibetan words. She just probably didn't spell check everything, and get everything consistent. So it has a clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object of engagement, and it's being unable to induce ascertainment with respect to the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object of engagement. Boy, it sounds very complicated. Right?
Does that mean it's not apprehended?
It cannot induce, is not apprehended, is not ascertained. It does, let's say eye consciousness, which sees, let's say ear consciousness, that hears, dinner's ready, lunch is ready, while the eye consciousness and the mental consciousness are watching the football game, the 49ers, or what's going on now, baseball or whatever, or watching ballet, and someone says something to you, and you're not paying sufficient attention with your mental consciousness to that to ascertain that. It's still apprehended, the ear consciousness still apprehends the sound, but it's not ascertained because it can't induce ascertainment. It can't induce, it's said to be not ascertained because it cannot induce a remembering consciousness that knows with certainty that you heard that. Okay? That's called an ascertaining consciousness. So here, this is one of the ones that has, okay?
Well, I always wonder about that because, you know how if somebody calls again, you remember that you've already been called? You actually didn't ascertain it, but you can remember that you were, like when your mom calls a second time, you go, oh yeah, she called 5 minutes ago, but I wasn't paying attention to that call.
Well, what would that be? Maybe you ascertained, maybe you said, maybe your mom said, dinner's ready, and then you were just watching the game, and then later she said, dinner's ready. You paid attention, and you said, oh, I heard something a while ago, but I didn't pay attention. I heard something. You might have had, remember when we were talking about the consciousnesses that realized something, that were prime cognizers with respect to the appearance, but not with the specific final nature of something. Maybe you knew you heard a sound, so that wouldn't be a totally inattentive perception, but it would be inattentive with respect to the meaning. Sometimes at an accident, the police say, did you see the license plate? The person, I don't remember, I didn't see the license plate. And then they put you under hypnosis, and you can remember, you can remember 70. I'm trying to think of someone's license plate number. No, I can't remember. Would that be an inattentive perception? If you can remember it later? Under hypnosis? No, that wouldn't be an inattentive perception. It would just mean something that was just barely ascertained. It wasn't blaring in your memory. But there can be things that are not ascertained because you're paying so much attention to one thing.
So it isn't something.
You wouldn't be able to remember that. You wouldn't be able to remember even in hypnosis. Okay. So here there are some subtleties in this. Why it says the specifically characterized phenomena. Who did I ask here? Okay, Mark. What is a specifically characterized phenomena?
I'm not sure.
That's a good answer. Get you out of that one quick. Carrie?
That's mom shouting dinner's ready.
A specifically characterized phenomena is mom shouting dinner's ready?
If that was from
What's the general meaning of a specifically characterized phenomenon?
it's something.
So
it's the opposite.
Carrie, an example, say, give an example of a specifically characterized phenomenon. Mom shouting dinner is ready. Yeah.
Like the blue. You saw blue or something. So there was this.
How about space? Is shunyata a specifically characterized phenomenon?
I don't think we characterize
specifically characterized phenomena is a synonym of what?
Not obstructive.
Impermanent phenomena. Impermanent. So not a synonym of object, because objects include impermanent and impermanent and permanent phenomena. So synonym of impermanent phenomena is specifically characterized phenomena. The synonym of permanent phenomena is what? Do you remember, Bunny? Generally characterized. Well, we could translate it that Chitsen, generally characterized phenomena. So here it's taking a specifically characterized, in other words, it's taking an impermanent phenomena as its object, as its engaged object. Why does it have to say that? Because there could be the doubt. Let's say this is talking about an inattentive perception, right? What if you had a wrong consciousness, a wrong sense consciousness that saw 2 moons when there's only 1 moon? If you didn't say which is its object of engagement, if you just said a knower, which is a common basis of having a clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena which is its object, does 1 moon appear to your eye? That 1 moon is a specifically characterized phenomena, right? The single moon is a actual phenomena, right? Is a specifically characterized phenomena, or let's say an impermanent phenomena, and is unable to induce ascertainment with respect to that specifically characterized phenomena. Is it able to, the wrong consciousness that sees 2 moon, is it able to induce certainty that you saw 1 moon? No, because it's a wrong consciousness. It thinks you saw 2 moons, right? But what is the object of engagement? When you talk about a direct perceiver, we talk about different kinds of objects. And if you talk about determined object or conceived object, that only takes place in conceptual consciousness, right? So that we don't have those kind of objects. So we can talk about the engaged object and the appearing object. Let's say, right? The apprehended, a synonym of the appearing object for a direct perception is the apprehended object. And a synonym of the engaged object is the object of the mode of apprehension. Remember? We talked about that in the beginning of the course. Sometimes we could talk about the referent object too, but here we're not going into that, and we're not concerned with conceived or determined object, because that only takes place for a conception. If you're conceiving of a house, the conceived object is the house. The appearing object is the meaning generality of the house, the mental image. The engaged object is the house, so forth. But here we're not talking about conception, we're talking about perception, right? Let's say an eye perception, an eye direct perception, or maybe not an eye direct perception. Let's talk about a non-conceptual eye consciousness, because to be a direct perceiver, to say an eye direct perceiver, it has to either be a prime cognizer, subsequent cognizer, or inattentive perception. But we do have a 4th category of eye consciousness that's not direct perceivers, right? Erroneous, like seeing 2 moons, or seeing because there's an error in your eye or an error in the basis and so forth. Wrong. Non-conceptual consciousness. So to that consciousness that sees 2 moons, let's say, what is is perceiving 2 moons? What is the appearing object? 2 moons are appearing? That is just the opposite, I think. That consciousness, what is appearing to that consciousness is 1 moon. That's the appearing object. But what the mind is engaging, what the consciousness is engaging in, is 2 moons. So actually there's no real object of engagement, but just as we talked about at the beginning of the course, you could posit an object of engagement. If someone said, well, what is the object of engagement? You could say 2 moons, or like if someone was perceiving the horns of a rabbit. There is no real engaged object, because an object, if it's an engaged object, it has to be an object, and if it's an object, it has to exist, right? It has to be either impermanent or impermanent. Horns of a rabbit don't exist, but you can conceive of the horns of a rabbit. And so if you talked about a conception of the horns of a rabbit, you could say the conceived object and the engaged object, you could posit those as the horns of a rabbit. But that wouldn't they would only be terminological. That would only be positing them as the engaged object, because the engaged object for that consciousness doesn't really exist. There's no horns of a rabbit. But there would be an appearing object to that conception. What would that appearing object be? Horns of a rabbit? The meaning generality of horns of a rabbit, because that does exist. There is an appearance to your consciousness that looks like the horns of a rabbit. You can't say that doesn't exist, but via that you are engaging in something that doesn't exist. You are determining or conceiving of something that doesn't exist, right? So now leave that for a second. That's conception. Go back to perception, or let's say eye consciousness. We're not talking about a prime cognizer or subsequent cognizer or even a subsequent cognizer, which is the main section here. But the reason why this word which is its object of engagement has to be put in. If you just said which is its object, or specifically characterized phenomena, then you could talk about, that definition wouldn't work, because you could talk about a wrong eye consciousness, an erroneous eye consciousness that was, say, perceiving 2 moons, or perceiving a firebrand as a circle of light, or seeing a blue snow mountain or something. You could say the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object, its appearing object, such as the 1 moon, or the white snow mountain, or the white conch. Those things, there is a clear appearance of them, because they do clearly appear, but those consciousnesses are unable to induce ascertainment with respect to that specifically characterized phenomena, because it's not able to induce ascertainment that there was 1 moon, because of the error in the eye, you were ascertaining 2 moons. You thought you were ascertaining 2 moons. You have a remembering consciousness of 2 moons, and you weren't able to induce ascertainment of a white snow mountain, because you thought that you saw a blue snow mountain, or a yellow conch because you had jaundice. Making sense? Chris, does it make sense? Diana?
But it says,
Yeah.
the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object of engagement, so wouldn't that have to be an actual...
Yeah, that's why this definition is correct. That's why I'm saying, I was sort of trying to give an idea why it says it's, you might say, well, it's so wordy. Come on, just give me a nice, simple definition. You saw an object and you didn't pay attention. Why does it have to use all of these words? It's eliminating different kinds of possibilities. Because if let's say for in the case of the wrong consciousness, the wrong eye consciousness, I see two vases of flowers right now, okay? Actually, I need both eyes to do that, I think. I see 2 vases of flowers. I see 2 Chris's, 2 Marks. Can I see 4 Marks? No, I still only see 2. I see 2. Two Taras back there, okay? 2 Skitty Garbas. So, what's the object of engagement? It says it has a clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena which is its object of engagement or operation. In the case of a wrong consciousness, is there a specifically characterized phenomena which clearly appears as its object of engagement? Does it have a clear appearance of an object of engagement? What's the object of engagement of the eye consciousness perceiving two moons, apprehending two moons? The object of engagement, although it doesn't really exist, the object of engagement are, if you had to be positive, the two moons, double moon. So, but that's not a specifically characterized phenomena. Specifically characterized phenomena has to exist.
It doesn't exist though because
It doesn't. There is not two moons, you're right. Maybe in some world systems there are two moons.
Not here.
Not here. Okay. So making some sense? Bonnie's shaking her head, no? Okay. Chris?
Could you just go over specifically and generally?
Characterized phenomena. Those are synonyms, and for various reasons in logic why those terms came up. Generally characterized phenomena kind of means generality, in a sense, related with generalities. Generalities, from the Sautrantika point of view, are things that don't have real existence. They're mere projections of the mind. Like, although generalities do have some kind of, they are within objects of knowledge, they're permanent, they're not able to perform a function. Although there is a generality of watch, and this specific watch is an instance of the generality of watch, you can't point out anywhere generality of watch. Where is generality of watch? Remember the thing we talked about before, the category that was none of the four sort of thing? Can you point out that category anywhere? Anything that you point out has to be one of the four, but there is theoretically that category also. Okay? So generally characterized phenomena is a synonym in the Sautrantika for permanent phenomena. Specifically characterized, you could call it, or rangsen, self-characterized phenomena, maybe you could translate it also as, are phenomena that do have instances, that you can actually perceive. And so they are able to perform a function, specifically characterized or self-characterized phenomena.
Are specifics specifically characterized phenomena?
As opposed to generally characterized. That's how they were translating the wrong here, as specific as opposed to generally characterized.
Specifics necessarily
you could have a specific...
non-mental?
What do you mean by mental? Mental can mean consciousness. Consciousness is a specifically characterized phenomena because it's impermanent. But if you're talking about mental images are generally characterized phenomena, as are other kinds of phenomena like space. Space is a permanent phenomena. I don't mean the space that we see with our eyes, but the lack of obstructive contact. Shunyata, selflessness, what do you call it? When we talk about the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of the path, the truth of cessation, the truth of suffering, the truth of the cause of suffering, the truth of cessation, the truth of the path. Truth of cessation, cessations are also permanent phenomena. In the Abhidharma Kosha, as opposed to the Abhidharma Moksha, it says that space and the two cessations are permanent. Those are the only examples it gives, although you can debate, and when you study Abhidharma Kosha, you can debate also, they would have to accept, the Vaibhashikas would have to accept that selflessness is also permanent. Like, for instance, when you realize, remember when we talked about realization of selflessness according to Sautrantika, selflessness can be realized with a direct perceiver, right? But not directly. Because selflessness is a generally characterized phenomena. It's permanent. So it is not the appearing object of direct perception. This was another thing we talked about. The appearing object of direct perception has to be an impermanent phenomena, has to be specifically characterized. The appearing object of conception is a generally characterized phenomena, is an impermanent phenomena. Okay, so if you had a direct perception of emptiness or selflessness, that is to say, with a direct perception, the appearing object, according to Sautrantika, could not be a generally characterized phenomena such as selflessness. The Prasangika, though, say that there's no problem. But according to Sautrantika, you cannot, with a direct perception, you cannot have a direct realization. You cannot, the appearing object to that direct perception cannot be a permanent phenomena such as selflessness. You have to realize it indirectly. What you're perceiving are the aggregates which are empty of a self or empty of a permanent partless self. And sort of indirectly, you're sort of seeing that, not with your eyes, but you're sort of knowing that directly, that impermanent phenomena is the appearing object. And via that, you are indirectly knowing the selflessness. Remember, we talked about this before, but it's good to bring all of this together. Okay.
You mentioned the two sensations of permanence?
Yeah. Oh, according to Abhidharma Kosha, there are what I think Jeffrey Hopkins translated as analytical cessations and non-analytical cessations. So according to upper tenets, really cessations are a real cessation is what the Vaibhashikas call analytical cessation. That is, you've eliminated something so it will not arise by eliminating its conditions and roots. You've eliminated it from the mind so it will never arise again. That's an actual cessation. What a non-analytical cessation is, you have to read what that might mean. So let's just see here before we finish up, because we don't want to have too much time, and I think there's going to be puja a little bit later. So this is kind of the long, convoluted definition of a inattentive perceiver. However, one should know the manner in which not to posit, the manner in which not to posit as the definition of something's being an awareness to which an object appears without being ascertained. Namely, that which is a common locus of having the clear appearance of a specifically characterized phenomena which is its object. What's being left out there? Object of engagement. And being unable to induce ascertainment with respect to the specifically characterized phenomena which is its object. Because if you said that, if you tried to posit that as the definition of an inattentive perceiver, there wouldn't be the correct pervasions. You could posit something that was that definition, such as a wrong eye consciousness, would fit that definition, but it wouldn't be that definendum. It wouldn't be an inattentive perceiver. Remember the difference between a definition and a definendum? Do you know how those words are being used? The definition in this case are these long sentences. The definendum is that which is being defined. In this case, the awareness to which an object appears without being ascertained. That's called the definendum. The definition of the definendum is this thing, a knower which is a common locus of having clear appearance of Okay, so the definition, the definendum is that which is being defined. So here it gives a reason. It says that is because a sense consciousness that sees snow mountains as blue sees as blue the white color of the snow mountain, which is its object of engagement, object of operation. That actually sees as blue the white color of the snow mountains, which is its object of engagement, and therefore does not see clearly the specifically characterized phenomena which is its object of engagement or object of operation. Does not see clearly. I'm not quite sure she's got that right, the grammar of it. The object of this kind of consciousness, or wrong consciousness, doesn't really have an object of engagement. It's only posited, right? Here it says, which is its object of engagement. It sounds like it's saying here, the white snow mountain is the object of engagement. Is that how you would read her sentence there?
It is, but they're saying it as blue.
But is that the object of engagement? The The blue snow mountain is what's being engaged.
I think that's what she means, because next time she says still the appearing object, the white color.
Of a snow mountain appears clearly as blue, whereas it does not exist as blue. There is the clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object. But the way she's written it there first, this is because a sense consciousness that sees snow mountains as blue, that sense consciousness, sees as blue the white color of the snow mountains, which is, now what is it, which is its object of operation? What is, this is one of Maureen's questions, right? When it was saying, what does that refer to? What is the which is its object of engagement here? The way she's written it, the thing that's closest looks like the white color of the snow mountains. But it's the blue that is the blue color of that the mind is apprehending, that's the object of engagement. That's what the mind is engaging. The consciousness is engaging. Does that make sense?
No.
No. You read it that way? Which way?
She's referring to the blue.
Sounds like she's referring to the blue. Okay, you think it's okay. In Lottie Rinpoche's teaching that Elizabeth Knepper translated on page 101, to the end of 101, here, let me read you something. So I'll read it quickly. Just listen for a second. For direct perceivers, this is on the bottom of page 100, the last paragraph. For direct perceivers, one can posit three objects, right? They do not have a determined object, that is, because they're not conceptual minds, but they do have an object of engagement, as well as an appearing and apprehended objects. This is also true for an awareness to which an object appears, but is not ascertained. In the example of a sense-direct perceiver apprehending a form, like, say, seeing flowers, one can posit the form as its object of engagement. The consciousness does not have a determined object. For to posit such, there must be a conceptual determining involved. There has to be a conception. To determine means to think, it is such, and that does not occur with direct perception, so there's no determined object. The form is also the appearing object, the apprehended object, and the object of the mode of apprehension of such a direct perceiver. This is talking about a correct direct perceiver. In the case of direct perceivers, whatever is the main object of operation, that means the main object of engagement, is necessarily the appearing object. This is interesting. The main object of engagement is necessarily the appearing object. However, whatever is its object of engagement is not necessarily its appearing object. The main object of engagement, let's say in this case is a blue flower, the main object of engagement is its appearing object. But whatever is its object of engagement is not necessarily its appearing object, because it can have several objects of engagement. For one can say that the opposite from non-form is its object of engagement. That's what's being known, that's what's being engaged, but that doesn't appear because that's a permanent phenomena. The main object of engagement, the thing that's directly engaged, is the form itself, not the opposite of non-form. Then also, whatever is an appearing object of a direct perceiver is not necessarily its object of engagement. How does that work? Whatever is the appearing object of a direct perceiver is not necessarily its object of engagement. Bonnie, you getting it? What was it? Why? Because the impermanence of the form, say when I'm perceiving these flowers, the impermanence of the form does appear. Its momentariness, the form's ability to perform a function, and so forth, are all appearing objects of direct perceiver apprehending a form. But they are not the objects of engagement of that eye consciousness.
It's like emptiness.
Well, emptiness doesn't, according to Sautrantika, that's a permanent phenomenon, so that doesn't appear to eye consciousness. But impermanence does appear. All of the things that are one nature with the flower in terms of its conventional nature of being impermanent, all those impermanent phenomena do appear, but they're not all engaged by the eye consciousness. Okay, so that's giving a little, can give you a little more to think about here. In the case of a non-conceptual wrong consciousness, that's what we're talking about, an eye consciousness, right? Non-conceptual, like an eye consciousness, such as a sense consciousness perceiving white snow mountains as blue, there are appearing and apprehended objects, but no object of engagement or determined object. If one were asked to posit the object of engagement of such a mind, one would have to posit the blue snow mountains, which do not exist, and thus one answers that the object of engagement does not exist. This distinction is important in terms of the definition of an awareness to which an object appears but is not ascertained, as will be discussed later. One cannot posit a determined object for a non-conceptual wrong consciousness because only thought consciousnesses have such. So, does it make some sense? So, in the case of a wrong eye consciousness, a wrong non-conceptual consciousness, or a wrong ear consciousness, whatever, what you're engaging and what is appearing is actually the actual phenomena that's appearing to you. That's a generally characterized phenomena. So here, when we talk about an awareness to which an object appears without being ascertained, so it's a common locus of having the clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object of operation, object of engagement. So that means it's not a wrong consciousness. If it has a clear appearance of the object of engagement, if the object of engagement clearly appears, it is not a wrong consciousness. If the object of engagement, let's say in this case the snow mountains, that's not clearly appearing to that consciousness, the object of engagement, because the object of engagement doesn't really exist. So how could it clearly appear? Okay, so think about that a little bit. Still, since its appearing object, the white color of the snow mountain, appears clearly as blue, whereas it does not exist as blue, there is the clear appearance of the specifically characterized phenomena, which is its object. That's the wrong consciousness. Also, it is unable to induce ascertainment with respect to that because it engages the object perversely. So that's why not having the word its object of engagement in those two parts of the definition would make the definition defective. Let's jump up to page 39. Because I want you to take a look at some of those things, think about them. The definition of the next non-prime cognizer. So what have we had? Non-prime cognizers. We've had subsequent cognizer, correctly assuming consciousness, consciousness to which an object appears but is not ascertained. Now, doubting consciousness. There's one more after this, wrong consciousness. Doubting consciousness definition: a knower which has qualms or doubts too pointedly by its own power. This is according to Purbachok. So it's a two-pointed mind by its own power here. Two-pointed mind means it hasn't come to surety. This is what you were talking about before, Karen. It's not really sure about it. It's thinking, like say, yeah, there are future lives. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure. That would be a doubt leaning in the right direction. You know, I'm not completely sure. Maybe they're not, but probably there are. What about, you could have an equally balanced doubt, thinking, I don't know. Maybe he's Buddha, maybe he's not. The Dalai Lama, I don't know. Completely unsure. You could have a doubt leaning in the wrong direction. They say that all phenomena are impermanent and selfless, but I don't know. Maybe they are, but I don't think so. That would be a doubt leaning in the wrong direction. A doubt means a mind, a doubting consciousness, which is not certain. It's too pointed, like they said, the example they give of a needle with 2 points. Here, by its own power, according to this definition, that means it's only talking about the mental factor doubt. Because there are other factors in the mind, when you have a doubting consciousness, that are too pointed about the object, but not by their own power, due to the presence of doubt. So, as Lhasa Rinpoche said, he himself and some lamas say, they don't think it's necessary to have by its own power in all definitions. Although this limits the meaning of a doubting consciousness to a mental factor, the mental factor doubt. Because a mental factor doubt is too pointed by its own power, that is, just by its own nature, not by the power of something else being present. Okay? So we'll talk more about that next time. What do you think? Then also, if you have a chance to look at the next one after that, read this section, and the last of the non-realizing consciousnesses, wrong consciousness, is a knower which engages its object erroneously, on page 41. So there are 2 kinds, conceptual and non-conceptual. And then in chapter 4, we'll talk next time also about other divisions of consciousness. We can divide them up into 3, and we can divide them up into mind and mental factors and different kinds of divisions. Okay. Why don't we dedicate our energy here, dedicate our merits. Bring your mind to a concentrated state so you can actually do the first part of the dedication, the conventional dedication. You have to have a strong aspiration that these merits actually ripen in a particular way. And there are numberless kinds of dedications one can make. One can dedicate for the Dharma to flourish, for sentient beings to find happiness, for calamity to be finished, and so forth, for oneself to attain enlightenment. The dedication due to these merits, may I quickly attain enlightenment, and so that I can set each and every sentient being in that same state, that's dedicating the merits for our own enlightenment. So that's a bodhicitta motivation. Basically, it's thinking for a very high goal, giving up one's own attachment to these merits. And if the higher the goal that one dedicates to, that prevents them from being exhausted in some lesser goal, like say, due to this merit, may I become rich in my next life. Or due to these merits, may I become famous. May I defeat everyone else in debate. Maybe if you had a very strong wish that way, the merits might have the tendency to ripen in that way due to one's motivation. But then they would be exhausted. They would give their results once, like a what do they call it? An annual tree, or a tree that comes just once, like a banana tree. So dedicate them to the highest goal of our eventual enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. Thinking how wonderful that would be if they ripened. They should ripen. They will ripen in that way. I dedicate them in that way. And then seal that dedication. The second kind of dedication is the dedicating within the three spheres, the emptiness of the three spheres, meditating about the conventional dedication that we did, that the merits that we were dedicating are not truly existent. They can't be found anywhere, although they do exist conventionally and do function. They're not inherently existent. The goal dedicated to our eventual enlightenment for the welfare of sentient beings does exist conventionally, but does not exist inherently. It's just a conception, conceptually imputed state that can exist in the future. And the active dedication, which includes the actor, the agent, myself, the trying to join up with the mind, the merits to a particular goal, that also can't be found. It's not inherently existent, just imputed to these moments of mind, let's say. So in this way, letting go of one's apprehension of these three spheres as inherently existent protects them perfectly from the danger of anger, burning them up, from wrong view, abandoning dharma and so forth, that can cause the roots of virtue that are not so dedicated to be destroyed.